March. If I just note that live stream has started, and if you could just note the emergency procedures on the screen. If everyone in the room could just make sure their mobile is switched to silent, that would be great. And a reminder for members to use their microphone for those listening online, and same for any of our public speakers as well. I said March apparently before, so we're obviously in May, so we're not time travellers. Okay, so moving through to our opening karakia. Please feel free to join me. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Apologies, I've just got one apology from Deputy Mayor Tui Lewis. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no, declare that carried. We'll now move through to public comment. So we do have, I believe, around 10 people who wish to speak. Obviously, some to their submissions, which they have made through the annual plan process, but others to the agenda items before us. So you should be able to see that. Has everyone got sort of clarity on that? Has that been provided to the members? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll read out whether it relates to a submission or an agenda item as we go through. So first up, we have Sam Faisandia from Faisandia Group. Welcome, Sam. And Sam is speaking to item 5B, which is development contributions.
Sam from Cuttress, was he put on? We were just going to, can we join?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to come together, come up together, absolutely. No problem. So a total of 3 minutes, and that includes any time for questions. So yeah, leave it to you.
3 minutes each total?
Or 3 minutes in total.
Yep. That's all.
Actually, Sam is second on my list, so happy to have 6 minutes if you want to just do it together. Yep.
Good to be first. Get on with the day. Look, there's no surprise from we're representing. I'm a developer. Did this last year, sort of set our views. We're a year on, and you know, there's data there for the consents numbers that are coming through that things are dropping off. It's worse than a year ago, and you know, we operate on a high volume model where we're able to spread our costs over about 100. We try and build about 100 predominantly townhouses. We mainly now target the valley floor. We don't work outside that just because the type of housing is more urban, and we want to be close to the centres. And so for our model to work, we need about 100 houses. And to date, they've been all in the Hutt Valley. Now we're already forced to take our capital and go elsewhere. There's just not enough opportunities that make sense. And what we can see going forward is that's just going to get tougher. And that's us being able to do it across a large scale where we're not seeing, you know, good luck to anyone who's given it a go, and they've got 1 or 2 projects. We've already put in a piece around a feasibility study that we shared and just trying to enlighten some of the challenges. So, you know, it's clear that we're suggesting that you halter the current DCs. I actually believe we need to be a lot smarter between us and we're just making it clear that we're available as a resource. And, there's an example of the infrastructure upgrade proposed to Knights, Pretoria. It looks good, and what I've been told, that was just bare minimum to keep any development happening in the location. But I sort of had a look at that catchment, and it was interesting. We don't get consulted on that, which I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but for us to be able to develop, we need certain available land of certain size in the catchment. And I was just looking at that catchment. A lot of those sections are probably too small, and we don't get efficiencies, economy of scale. So I'm not sure if that comes in or if that was just a mere, you guys needed to upgrade that infrastructure. So I just think there's a lot to be gained by more consultation with the key stakeholders, and what we're seeing, like no one else is doing anything. It's that bad. So yeah, unfortunately, our sale price in the Hutt Valley, for example, is about 600K compared to something in the city that might be 750, 800, but the pipes cost the same amount. So as a DC cost, we understand that challenge, but I think we've just got to be smarter how we utilise what infrastructure fund you guys have got to get real bang for buck, because we don't know where you guys are wanting us to build. Maybe we're guilty of not asking, but I still think come a year from last time, we haven't made much ground in that space. Sam's got a comment from what we bring up from 2 years ago that there'd be more relief in certain areas, but that I don't think we've got much on that. Do you want to talk on that?
Yeah. Do you want to conclude Sam's section and questions? Or?
Yeah, sure. Any questions, Councillor Barrett?
Kia ora tātou. I have been told that there is a real shortage of single dwelling houses in the Hutt. Do you feel that that is part of the problem?
I think there is a shortage, but it's just it's not viable to develop. You're getting more house for a 2-level, so you can fit more in and you can spread your costs. So for a sale price of a single level, I just don't think affordability comes into it. I think there is a shortage of smaller single level. Yeah.
Councillor Barrett? Sorry, Councillor Brown?
Kia ora, Sam, thank you. I'm the Ward Councillor for Wainui-a-Mata, and you've done some great work out there and been very generous to the community while you've been working, so thank you for that. Are you on the leadership group? Because I agree with what you say about the planning, because we are a city that's building up, not out. We don't have land. So how we plan is really important for where we put them, but all of that's been built have all been filled in Wainui-a-Mata. So that was the question, are you on the leadership team? Because that's all, in that planning is important.
Me personally, I'm not, but people in the team are, yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, there's a basic principle council follows, and it's noted in our papers today, that growth pays for growth, and our central government follows the same principle. And the papers note that kind of what's been asked of us today is to deviate from that principle. So I was just wondering, in the developer community, does the community believe in the same principle, that growth pays for growth, that future residents pay for future infrastructure needs, or do you think it should be rolled out on the current ratepayers?
Yep, it's just right now we're about to enter, I think we're going to have no growth. So you guys do your model off your DCs, I think it was 400 or 500 dwellings a year. If it's a quarter of that, does that mean your DCs have to go up by 4 times? I think there's a bit of a broken piece there that, I believe you've got to invest, and council are the best people to I feel, to start that process. You got to invest to bring people in, encourage people to do development and grow. And I think it's got to start right in the centre. Unfortunately, we've got to retract if, we've got issues everywhere infrastructure-wise, but we've probably got to just pick the easy fruit and actually invest and then encourage development to happen in those. Our costs are just, like I said, we're only got that 600K price point. Unfortunately, we can't raise our prices right now. So if it doesn't work within that, we stop. Yeah. And even to date, we've probably, just out of loyalty, pushed on because we have a lot of connecting trade and teams just to tie us through. And look, we can absorb some losses and break even on some sites, but only for so long we'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you. We are running quite a bit behind already, so we're going to move over to you, Sam, if that's okay.
Yep, that's okay. Yes, so Sam Godwin, Director at Cuttress Consultants, local land development consultancy here. So here representing kind of landowners, developers and other consultants, and just really want to highlight the impact that the DC settings are going to have on housing supply. And Sam's mentioned it, but to put it plainly, the development in Lower Hutt has fallen off a cliff. Only 166 resource consents have been lodged this financial year, well short of the around 400 that council would typically expect. And anecdotally, we've heard from council officers that the proportion of multi-unit applications, the likes that Fysandia Group develop, have dropped from 60% to 15% of that. What was 400 allowed for, and 166 in the current year, which is pretty alarming. Broader housing market conditions and financial pressures play a role, of course, so we're not ignoring that. But right now, the one-off subdividers to the full-time developers, the feasibility of these developments just don't stack up, so development is stalling. The July 2024 DC increase seems to have tipped the balance. The economics of the residential development, particularly in the medium density space, simply don't work under the current cost structure. The only developers still building at any meaningful scale are those deeply committed to this city. They're pushing ahead out of loyalty, not profitability, and often they're just scraping through on the old DC rates, not the current ones. If council proceeds with another increase on 1 July or even holds the DCs at today's levels, development won't return until house prices lift significantly, and that is what Sam's just been talking about. And that could be years away. And in the meantime, council risks prolonging these suppressed consent numbers, falling well behind the IAF target of 3,600 homes by 2035, and creating more of a housing shortage that we've just been speaking about on the valley floor. And we're already seeing developers, not just Fysandia Group, but other developers looking elsewhere to neighbouring councils in search of financially viable land. I understand council may have concerns about the pause on the DC increase and the revenue shortfall, I guess. But let's be honest about the numbers. And again, we've just been talking about this. If development isn't happening, you're not getting that DC, income. We need to encourage development so the numbers that the revenue forecast is based on can come to light. There's a more strategic approach we could take, and I think in May 2024, this committee resolved to ask the policy committee to consider targeted DC relief in its work plan to support citywide outcomes. Council adopted that on 4th of June 2024, but we are not aware that any work has been taken in this space or undertaken in this space. So what if alongside a pause, council delivered a targeted DC relief in areas earmarked for intensification, places where infrastructure already exists and where growth makes sense? Why not leverage Hutt City Council's well-connected rail corridor, the Te Ara Tupua cycleway and the upcoming Riverlink project? And around growth should pay for growth. Developers are now being asked to install wastewater mitigation and stormwater reuse systems, adding about $20,000 per dwelling to ensure their projects don't impact Three Waters network. If they're already mitigating their own infrastructure impact, why are they still being charged full DCs for bulk upgrades? Why not provide relief where these systems are being put in place and not loading the network? I say this with confidence, wrapping up shortly. I'm an owner of a firm with 75-year history in Lower Hutt, employing over 50 staff and holding a significant market share of the local subdivision market. We're simply not seeing small-scale landowners in the market anymore. They've disappeared. The financials don't work. Urge you to take a more targeted approach, incentive-based approach that welcomes development back into the Hutt, not someday, but now. You as a council should say Hutt City is ready for growth and we welcome development to get your DC financials. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Is there any really quick questions? Just mindful of our time already. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
I'd just encourage you, if any of you want to see how much goes into what we've got to do on the site to mitigate the services, I'd happily show you around, because I think you'd be shocked with how much we've got to put below the ground and now above the ground for all the mitigation requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, councillors, anyone who wants to take Sam up on that. Yep.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Okay, moving through to James Beban, speaking on the same item. Welcome, James. I'm getting the nudge from next to me around our timing, so we will need to keep to the 3 minutes, if that's okay.
I should know by now. So thank you. I'm James Bevan. I'm also a Director of Urban Edge Planning. The problem of going second is a whole lot of what you want to say goes first. But just to reiterate, and I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle, in that I'm going to look at it from a zoning perspective. So I'm supportive of the DCs holding where they are, and my reasons are kind of rationalised along the same as the two Sams that have just spoken. But in terms of my position, they also, Hutt, for a long period of time, had a competitive advantage over zoning, and that it had a very permissive framework that encouraged residential development in the city. So that brought developers here. With the medium density residential standards that have come through from central government and all the intensification plan changes, Hutt has lost that competitive advantage. So what happens now is you're competing on the same zones in all the entire region. And that means developers that used to be quite, Hutt-based or Upper Hutt-based or Wellington-based, it's actually easier for them to move across boundaries now because the provisions are more standardised. So you don't have the same kind of captured development market anymore, nor do you have the same captured zoning market. So you're now moving into more of an open market where it's now tested on economics. And when you start looking at the Hutt development contribution fees, it's always important to remember that in Lower Hutt, you also add the reserve fees to it. A lot of the councils in the Wellington region incorporate their reserve fees into their development contribution fees. So in the Hutt, it's not just development contribution fees, but it's the $10,000 reserve fee on top as well. Whereas if you go to Wellington City example, their development contribution is just a full all-in-one package. So it's just the one fee. So when you start it's got to always remember that it's a double hit here in the Hutt. So if I reckon, looking at the numbers, I think they said, if you had 190 houses built in the Hutt in the next year, the financials would be around, $1.5 million or whatever the paper says. I think if you actually increase the DCs, you'd be lucky if 25 to 50% of that number is constructed in the Hutt in the next year. And that's just purely based on the financials and of the fact that the market is moving into places like Upper Hutt and Kapiti, where it's a little bit cheaper and the profit margins are stacking up a bit better. And that's what you're seeing here. It's very easy to look at the consent numbers and go, this is systematic of the economy to where we are at the moment. The economy has slowed down, so therefore the Hutt consent numbers have slowed down. Yes, there's an aspect of that, but equally, we're finding there's a lot more happening in Upper Hutt and Kapiti now, more than ever has been, because for the first time ever under the zoning provisions, those areas have now opened up. They've got the attractiveness from a market perspective, and their costs are just a little bit lower than Hutt City, and that's just enough to make the difference. So I can end it on that, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, James. Any questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, James. I think you've just described a situation we've been well aware of for years, that we did allow development in our city and created a bubble, and that playing field's now been evened out across the region, as you noted. In our presentation slides today, the numbers of dwelling consents, it notes that they're down 26% in Lower Hutt, but down 24.5% across the Wellington region. So, you talk about development shifting elsewhere and what's happening elsewhere, but is it as pronounced? Do you feel it's as pronounced as
Yep.
you think it is, or that we've heard it is, or is it actually that there's just a downturn in the region?
Oh, there's definitely a downturn in the region, but I suspect you'll also find that the numbers are probably overrepresented in Porraburu as well. They have very high development contributions, and they're actually a lot higher than Lower Hutt, and they've gone, there's not just not even an inquiry now really in Porraburu, that's just died off completely. So I think you'll find it'll be patchy in the areas. I think Upper Hutt, their numbers are actually way up on year, and that's a function of cost and profitability and where it sits in the market now.
Any other final questions? Thank you very much, James. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Okay, next up is Mike Fisher from the Petone Community Board, and this is the annual plan feedback as well. So you'll have that document, I believe, on page 216.
Thank you and good morning, councillors. It occurred to me when I was just jotting down some notes that this actually will be the last time that the Petone Community Board actually gets to present to an annual plan. So we better hit you between the eyes good and hard while we have the chance. You have our submission in front of us. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to it. As noted, there's been an awful lot of consultations going on in the last few months. So there has been, as we have mentioned before, a consultation overload in the community. But despite this, a clear theme did come through in our conversations we've had with residents and feedback people have picked up around and about on their travels. And that relates naturally to the situation with parking charges in Petone. And as you know, we fought long and hard against those, but we've accepted that they're there. However, we would like to strongly recommend that the proposed 50-cent increase be deferred for at least a year. And I won't go into all the negative effects that the parking charges have had, because I know other speakers are going to cover that in more detail, and that will just save a wee bit of repetition and time. But they definitely have, and we feel that a deferral of any proposed increase would allow for a thorough review of the broader impacts of what the charges to date have had on the business and the community and the vibrancy, because we know from the figures we've seen that the revenue that was expected to be received has been lower, and there is a very clear number of vacancies in the parking on the street, and as I say, others will speak to that, I'm sure, in more detail and the effects on business. I'd just like to say also that naturally on a separate subject, we're delighted and relieved to see progress being made towards work on the wharf and in the areas of the library, and we know in due course on the grandstand. And I'd particularly like to thank Councillor Brown and her committee the other week for approving those proposals and getting that work underway. So definitely encourage that, getting a final tick off from this meeting to enable that work to be continued. And I know that Kaz may have some comments now just to add, but I'd just like to say finally, in conclusion, from my point of view, although it is the last official annual plan submission from the Petone Community Board, rest assured that you will continue to keep hearing from Petone. Thank you.
Morena koutou, just want to, I guess, reiterate some of those things as well, and recognising that in terms of some of that parking dynamic, there are a lot of other conversations around how that may be done differently, and I guess we are often hearing about other people's solutions and where the room might be to have that kōrero about how that could be done better, because it is it's been quite a challenge for a number of our community, and it doesn't take too many businesses to talk to work out how much of an impact it has had on them. And yes, we'll leave that for others to also speak into that space. And I guess I really want to also just quickly hone in into the Ava Railway Bridge. That is something that we are really relieved to see some progress on. And it is really great to hear the progress, and we're really grateful to have Paul Hewitt come and speak to our last meeting in Moira, knowing full well that really impacts a lot of our residents. And I guess one of the flags I want to just make sure is over that is recognising how good the replacement might be, because reality is, at the moment, it's not really up to spec for a lot of people, and actually that is a huge concern for a lot of commuters, going both ways. And if you talk to a lot of residents, they would love to see that widened. And, I guess my concern and our concern, having heard so much feedback at the fair from a lot of our residents, was, is there an opportunity to make it even better? And I guess I want to leave you with that question. Kia ora.
Thank you, Kaz. I really appreciate it. And Mike, any questions? Councillor Duncan.
Kia ora. Thank you for your feedback around the parking. Just wondering whether or not you've seen the data analysis or the data that officers have provided. To summarise, it was a 1% decrease in revenue and for Petone. However, the revenue decrease for Wellington itself was 1.5%. Sorry, I'm doing these off memory, so they could be slightly out, and 4.4% decrease for Hutt City. That means that the Petone changes actually had a positive effect. I know it's horrible to hear, but people being able to find car parks mean that they actually manage to shop more at Petone. And the negative effects of our current economic environment was not felt as hard in Petone. I know that's horrendous data to swallow, but what do you actually see in terms of that? Can you use some data-driven material rather than people's feelings? Because it feels horrible. This economic climate is really nasty for people. But I do want to drive this by data.
Okay. You have opened a real can of worms there, Councillor, I suspect. I don't have the precise figures in front of me. There are others in this room who run businesses, who advocate for the street, who will be able to give you very precise figures on that. I would, and I don't want to misquote him, but I would refer you also to Oscar Wilde, who I believe once said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. We can interpret some of those figures from market view in a number of ways. I don't think they necessarily cover every type of transaction. And again, there are people more qualified than I to emphasise that. I know, and others have seen with their own eyes, the gaps in the street of parking that we've never seen before in Petone, in those car parks that are now charged. Now, that leads me to believe that there's an issue. The figures that have been mentioned by businesses to me and others would confirm that. There is a definite downturn. And to put it frankly, I wouldn't believe everything that you read in market view. If you base your entire argument on what is in market view, then it is a very flawed argument. That would be my personal opinion.
I guess one of the things that we have really noticed and have heard is actually from certain businesses who have been collecting their data, and they do that year on year. And actually for some of them, you can definitely see where the impact has hit them. We got a snippet and a glimpse of some of that data at our last meeting through a spoken presentation. I did ask whether or not that could be sent back through us. We haven't seen that. Well, I haven't seen it at least. But I'm really mindful also the context that it sits in. So for instance, do we have comparative data across our whole city? I'd be really interested to see how that fits, as well as from suburb to suburb, but also as someone who has worked in Petone for 17 years as well, you can definitely see how different it is. And I'm really interested to kind of be able to compare data and context, because that's something that I don't think has been presented to us. And I don't know if you folks have it, but we haven't seen it.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time. Okay, next we have Nick and Helen from Jackson Street Program. Oh, sorry. Actually, no, that's fine. Are you okay, Patrick, Mark, to go next? Sorry, I skipped Patrick and Mark. I'm just conscious. No, in case they need to be places. Sorry, Nick, that's my fault. Welcome, gents. So speaking to the submission.
Kia ora, Mr Mayor, councillors. Thanks again for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce and the Lower Hutt business community. Firstly, I just want to acknowledge the hard work that is done by the council executive team and officers and the very strong relationship that council and chamber has. Hey, I want to acknowledge the significant challenges the council faces, balancing investment in infrastructure, services and community wellbeing. However, we ask that you also carefully consider the very real pressures facing our local businesses. They are not only major contributors to our economy, but also to our rates base, accounting for nearly 40% of all rates through property ownership. The salaries and wages paid to their employees also contribute significantly through rent and property ownership. Simply, businesses directly or indirectly contribute a significant proportion of the rates for our city. While we're encouraged by improving longer-term business sentiment, our recent March 2025 Business Confidence Survey makes it clear that many businesses remain under strain. 50% of respondents indicated they are either not confident or simply getting by. Operational costs are rising, and from September 2024 to March 2025, those expecting higher costs in the next 6 months jumped from 48% to over 61%, all at a time when staffing pressures are also increasing. In this context, proposed rate increases of over $2,000 per year for many commercial ratepayers are deeply concerning. One hospitality business facing an $18,000 increase exemplifies how such costs are not abstract, they're substantial, they directly impact employment, pricing and survival. Furthermore, additional charges like liquor licensing fees proposed to rise by nearly 40%, as well as food compliance, premises licensing and special licensing will hit our already struggling hospitality sector particularly hard. When compared to other councils, Hutt's fees are already on the higher end. Parking increases, as discussed, and their application to places like Petone are another example of these cost increases which impact on a business, their employees and their customers. We want to ensure that the Hutt continues to be a place people want to come to and is attractive for retail shopping. This is not the time to impose further financial pressure. In respect to the statistics mentioned earlier, whilst I acknowledged the decrease proportionally for Petone as an example is exactly what you've pointed out. Our point would be if our region is facing a decrease in spend, even if it is relative, we should be looking at what we can do to mitigate the impact of that decrease rather than just accept that, well, everybody's going down, so we'll just accept that we've gone down a little bit less. What can we do to ensure that we turn that around rather than just take the decrease as a given? Our business community is ambitious and we are ambitious for them. We've outlined a bold 10-year plan, our 35 by 35, which most of you, in fact all of you councillors should have in your inboxes. If for any reason you haven't received this, please reach out, we'll make sure you have a copy. That plan called 35 by 35 will see our GDP growing by 35% over the next 10 years, increasing productivity by 16% and expand our highly skilled jobs as well. But businesses use fewer council services, waste, libraries, pools, yet continue to pay disproportionately more. We respectfully ask, can we find a more equitable way? We want to see a thriving Hutt City, and to achieve that, we must enable our businesses to thrive. We ask you to consider these insights and apply a balanced, forward-looking lens as you finalise the 2025 annual plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Pat, did you want to, Patrick? No. Okay. Questions from members? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, gentlemen, both. The usual very comprehensive and sobering submission from the Chamber. Thank you. I've reached a point where I think the only way to get rates down is to cut services, and without wishing to, put our job onto you, does the Chamber have any view on where businesses would be willing to see actual cuts to council services to get a lower rate increase?
That's a big question. Probably deserves more time than we can give it now. I think when we look at the fact that the rates break down as it currently stands, which includes libraries and pools and all the great things we want to have in our city, businesses are already paying a large share of that, but don't actually direct any benefit from that. I don't know any business that get direct benefit from our pool. Certainly our residents do, but business rates pay for those same services. So I think there'd be a different question might be, how could we more equitably ensure that what business rates are paying for is what the rates are being charged for?
Councillor Briggs.
Just a brief comment before my question. I think if you ask any business in Hillary Court and Nainai, does a pool impact their business, then they would significantly say
Fair
yes.
call, I acknowledge that.
My question is, has there been any change in membership for the Chamber in the last 12 months, and is it declining or increasing, and how are they finding the cost of being a member and kind of how they're prioritising that at the moment, and have you noticed any trends?
So Chamber membership is up, our membership is growing. I think it's a reflection of both the organisation itself and the work Patrick's been doing day to day, along with a recognition that businesses want to work together more, they want better representation, and they're happy that we're sitting at the table here today sharing their views on their behalf.
Thank you for the great work.
Thank you.
Any final questions? Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Patrick. Really appreciate the
Thanks, everyone.
submission. Okay, Nick. Get it right this time. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Excellent. Welcome. And it's just yourself today?
Just myself today.
Great. Excellent.
Morena tātou katoa. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. Some of the things that the Chamber have just been mentioned by Mark and Patrick, we would agree with pretty much everything they've just said, and some of the things I'm about to mention are similar. The first thing is we, as the Jackson Street program, would just be perhaps keen for a greater engagement with council officers and the council over scheduled meetings to discuss matters of mutual interest. In terms of I think there's a reference here about rates equity. We would support a review at some point in the foreseeable future on the rates differential. That would be something that would be keen to see. In terms of licensing fees, one of the things that we would perhaps like to see is a review in favour of declining rates for people that have shown a good performance in that space, as a way of alleviating the burden on some of our hospitality industry, which is critical to Jackson Street. The main thing for us, of course, is the paid parking. Like Mike Fisher just said before, we accept that it's in place, you've got the capital in there, but we would like to note that it has had a very, very adverse impact on the street. We've undertaken a survey of the businesses to get some data, so we actually have some very clear data to provide, and we were happy to provide that to you. We would like to, perhaps in terms of a way forward, we'd like the council to consider offering a free period of some level to alleviate the pain. We think that there might be some opportunities to work with other ways to cut this cake so that it's mutually beneficial, so that it mitigates the impact on the Jackson Street program, and the Jackson Street business, I should say, but still achieves some of the revenue objectives for the council. So some of the things that have occurred, we've got basically some shops are shutting. Probably the headline thing is there's 13 vacancies on the street. So the proof is in the pudding. Before this regime took place, we had 7 vacancies. So that's probably your highest level metric data that you're after, Chris. There are a whole lot of other things that have occurred, and obviously we recognise, like what the previous speaker said, that there are other factors involved as well. It's not just paid parking, of course, but we are seeing reduced average sales. We're seeing some of the businesses have reduced hours. They've laid off some staff. So there are a number of impacts that have occurred, which to us are unambiguous. So yeah, as I would say, it would be. We would appreciate the opportunity to sit down with the council or council officers to review the regime, ideally to implement a period of free parking at the beginning that would mitigate some of the problem, undoubtedly. And yeah, just to, I guess, just to close off in terms of the data. So, I've got in front of me some very, very clear data. When you're looking at the data in the market view, it's partial. It doesn't include cash. It doesn't include all electronic transactions. And if you want to look at the data, go and have a look at the last 2 months and see the impact that it's had on Petone businesses. It's remarkable. Ngā mihi.
Councillor Parkin, Councillor Brown.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the data locally. The challenge I have is that in this economic climate, to make that data useful, you actually have to have that data from other sources as well, i.e. other regions, because it's comparative. It sucks that it is comparative, but if Petone is going down at a slower rate than somewhere else, that actually means that the changes have actually freed up car parks. And I know I spent some time down in Jackson Street. I rather enjoy going to Petone Depot on Friday. I'm probably missing that today for the Koha Cafe. But the change there, when you walk down the street and see empty car parks, the stories that I've heard from businesses about those car parks were not used by people shopping. They were used by the other people who worked in the shops, and therefore actually having those car parks meant that now you have the ability for people to come along and park and find a car park. I've also heard the stories from shops where they feel that their shoppers have not spent as much time there and have felt rushed to get off. So I'm very keen to see whether or not we can come up with some idea in terms of that free parking, but that will be a question for the table.
I can provide some data. We've had just a small number of shops collectively, we believe, have lost about $1 million in revenue. If you multiply that by some factor, the number is, to us, it's a very significant number. And the most important thing is, if we think of the loss that we believe is occurring in Jackson Street relative to the net revenue, there's to the council, we believe there's a very, very big gap. So the question is, how can we get that big number for the Jackson Street programs that we've assessed down without impacting the net revenue to the council? And we believe there are opportunities, and hence the request to engage with council to see if we can work something out.
Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Kia ora.
Pursuant to Standing Order 16.2, we have reached our time limit, so I'll just extend that. I'll move it. Councillor Briggs, second. All those in favour say aye. Those against, no. Declare that carried. Okay, Karen. Raj Fisher. Karen, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you. So good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I remember speaking to you all last year during the LTP hearings in regards to paid parking on Jackson Street, saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, you fixed it, and now it's broke. And then just to put the nail in the coffin, your officers are proposing a 50-cent increase per hour. So what business case has been prepared to justify this? If your justification is via market view, then it's flawed. Market view does not give you the full picture. It's one tool, yes, but not a comprehensive one. So you would have read in the submissions a small number of businesses on Jackson Street that have submitted. So I don't need to go through that in detail about their loss, but it is significant. This is your tool. I urge you all to go and speak to every business on Jackson Street to get the real picture. And you will hear effects from other people that are going to speak here today. My solution is the first hour free with Pay My Park app. I believe there's something similar in Hamilton. Yes, we know older people prefer paying with coins. However, with some education sessions, say like at the library hubs, at community houses, grey power, probus groups, we might be able to help our older citizens with that. So on to just a slightly different subject. In regards to the Petone Wharf and Grandstand, please continue the great work there. These are two important structures to not only Petone, but the wider Lower Hutt area. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I'll kick off with a question. If we were to make parking in Jackson Street free for that hour, should we also be doing that in Hutt Central?
Oh, that's totally up to you guys. But if you wanted to be fair, absolutely. But my concern is Petone.
Yeah. I suppose the reason I ask that is we have tried that before and it made no difference in regards to all of the data. Yeah. I mean, we can argue about the data, but it didn't show a demonstrable impact on
I think it would in Petone.
So you think there's a difference between the two?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Great. Thank you so much, Karen. Appreciate it. John Donnelly. Welcome, John.
Thank you. I've got a presentation because I like things visually. And right, so the effects of paid parking. We have a family business called The Table on Jackson Street. We own the building. And I'm going to talk from that perspective. So paid parking is a charge on shoppers. Most of the time, if you go to the street now, there's empty parks. And if there's an empty park, that means there's nobody in a shop. It's true, some people were freeloading, they've gone, but the rest of it is lack of shoppers. Less money being spent. So what we've seen is in a suburban shopping centre relative maybe to a city centre, the demand for parking is inelastic. You put the price up, people stop coming, or groups of people stop coming. We've found Monday to Friday superannuitants no longer come. That was a big part of the week. You want some real numbers? October to March, we're down 51,365 on last year. Now, some of that will be the economy grinding to a halt, but the rest of it's paid parking. We were already limping through the tough economy, so the effect on us is $100,000. It's unsustainable for a small business. Insufficient sales means there's just no profit. We're looking to move to somewhere that doesn't have the impact of paid parking. So I believe Jackson Street, you're changing the nature of the street. The nature of the street, so it's a leisure activity. People come from the entire region. They spend time, especially the weekends, they spend time superannuitants during the week. They walk, they grab a coffee, they come and buy something. That's how the street works. Wellington City's recognised that. They've got 90 minutes free in Kilburnie. Our business, we could have less. 60 minutes would be fine because we're a destination. We pull people from the entire central North Island, Hawke's Bay, Palmerston North, everywhere. So our business is under major stress. It was under stress in the economy. It's now non-viable. And we understand that the council needs revenue. One of the things that's come into the UK Labour Party has just come up with a solution which I think we should investigate. The Jackson Street is like a village street. So you go to Greater London, there's all these high streets. They've got the same effect. They're empty now. Part of that's the economy. They're small businesses less able to withstand this economic downturn. And when you put a charge on shoppers, they just go to where it's free. So where it's free, so they've divided business into small high street, which is your village discretionary, the vibrancy, which you're trying to reinvent in Nainai, which is great. Large format, we call big box, less discretionary shopping malls. And then you've got your online only, people like, we don't really have them, Amazon's a great example, but you can operate from the Horowhenua, you just need infrastructure, roading, warehouse, power and water. So I'm going to leave those ones out, but and what they said is the goal is to be rates neutral, but spread the load. And if you look at something like that on this next slide here, it's very easy to see. If you just pick on 6 large format, I can go the 2 supermarkets, the 2 hardware stores, Kmart, Briscoe's are doing very well. There's huge numbers there, and that's necessary shopping versus discretionary shopping. We've got a charge of $51,000 on a 6 months. So if you charge each of those 6 big box, just 6 of them, $2,500 a month, they've got no parking. Times 12, times 6, that's $180,000 you don't need then on paid parking. The same with the mall. I don't think the mall would worry at all if you charge them an extra $8,000 a month. There's 96. So 276 of your 400,000 that you're looking for could easily be gained instantly by spreading the load, which they've done in the UK. We could look at something. So this is just one solution. There'll be other solutions. Then you could have an hour free, and we can promote that. People would start to come back. I don't think we should go back to free totally, because you will get freeloaders. I think one of the things is there is more efficient use if there's some charge. So we oppose the 50 cents because will it make a difference? There's already a charge. We've already lost the shoppers. Will it make any effect? Who knows? It makes it worse. We want you to review the parking regime. The 1 hour needs to be free immediately. In 18 months or 2 years when the economy's better, will it have the same impact? Who knows? But we won't get through 18 months. So you need to review it straight away. Look to the UK model, talk to the JSP, find another solution. But Jackson Street is a suburban street. It's one of the best retail streets in the country. People go there in their leisure time, and you've changed the nature. The thing that we would like to do now, if you change the 400-metre rule, which is in the next submissions, we'll just move down to the big box area because we'll have free parking. So the heritage street, you've got it at risk of being completely emptied out, and it'll revert back to different types of businesses might come in eventually. That's my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate your submission as well. I think you've put some good options and considerations to us. Councillor Briggs.
2 questions for me, John. Thanks for coming in. The first one is, are you doing any online sales, and what proportion, kind of downturn, upturn have you seen? Is that in line with your in-store sales as well?
Yeah, we do. We have a very good e-commerce business, and which is why we're considering leaving Jackson Street and Lower Hutt, actually. There's no need to be interfered with, no disrespect with other people interfering with our business. I won't give the break, but in a few years, there's an argument that says we don't have to be here. But the whole point of Jackson Street, I love this street. Look, it's great vibrancy. Look at Parnell. Look at, just trying to think of the other one in Auckland. But yeah, Ponsonby Road. There's very few of these left. And they work a different way, and it's not a city centre like Lower Hutt and Wellington. If you go into Wellington, you have to pay for parking. You can't get out. It's a city centre, right? You expect it, but not on a suburban street. If you think suburban streets should be charged, put it in Nainai, put it in put it in Mangaraki, put it down Pilmuir Street by the hospital. If you have to pick up revenue, you can put parking all over the show. So you picked on one street, and I believe the demand for parking, it's an inelastic. So if you put a charge here, we've instantly seen empty parks, and I can show you directly the impact. Anyway, so yeah.
So to the question, have you seen an upturn or downturn proportionate to your in-store sales?
Sales are down
online?
in the economy right across. So the economy's terrible, but Jackson Street parking has made it a lot worse.
And then just final question for clarity for me around your relocation. So if you were to be relocating down to the big box end of Jackson Street, and you're saying you would get free parking, but it would come with your lease costs, would it not? Or
Yeah,
how would you see that?
I throw that in there because it's coming up, right? I see that happening with a lot of businesses. I would prefer to go somewhere completely different. I'd probably go out of town. Look, there's great businesses operating from the Mackenzie country. They do e-commerce all over New Zealand. And as we go forward, our product's highly discretionary on your statistics, Councillor Parkin. We're down 10.4% according to the figures. We're more than twice that down. So the figures are incomplete. I'd probably leave Lower Hutt. Yeah.
Thanks for coming in for your
You're
feedback.
welcome.
Yeah, I think, John, the challenge for us that we're trying to grapple with is how much of this is the macroeconomic climate versus the direct impact of parking. But I mean, again, your submission and other submissions are absolutely helpful in us trying to understand that a bit more. Councillor Parkin, last very succinct question. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. So on that, your 10% decrease, that's from your local spending, your in-store spending?
No, I'm just reading your market view. Market view, our category, which is
Your
department
category,
store and home, says it's down 10.4.
Okay,
What I'm telling you, the real figures are down more than twice that.
Because
So-
what I would be really interested in is what you, and feel free to say you don't want to share it, but what your, and Councillor Briggs was asking it earlier, what is your in-store take dropped by compared to your online store take?
Online's still ticking over across the country. We pull a lot of business out of Auckland, which is fabulous. But our local market, Monday to Friday was a lot of superannuitants come to the street. They don't all necessarily impact our business because we're mid to high end, but they'll impact the cafes and the other people. Yeah, sorry, I lost your question there. What was the point of it? Yeah.
Okay. Really appreciate your candor, John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Pam and Sylvia, welcome. And they are speaking to item 5F, the Petone Wharf.
Morena, Mayor and Councillors, tēnā koutou katoa. It was early 2017 when Council first focused on the 4 wharves. I remember it clearly as I was a new community board member, along with a certain Brady Dyer. We held 2 public meetings that were video streamed by now Council Dyer. Now PCB submission stated that there was overwhelming support for the Petone Wharf being repaired. Feedback on the council's annual plan survey at that time was that the Petone Wharf was the most used and the most wanted. There was stronger support for refurbishing Petone Wharf than there was for Days Bay even. Officers also reported that many submitters indicated they'd never visited Rona Bay Wharf and would prefer to see the resources put into Petone and Days Bay. And today we're still trying to get those wishes enacted. Since the recent 30th of April committee meeting, Sylvia and I have been part of a very constructive pre-resource consent application meeting with officers and heritage experts. We look forward to continuing to work with officers in the months ahead. In 2017, officers also reported that water bodies score just as well, if not better, in supporting psychological well-being as compared with green nature, and that the wharf can play an important role in delivering this mental health benefit. We totally agree with that statement and say the sooner that is possible again with Petone Wharf, the better. We're hopefully going to be working on this together with some further momentum after today. He waka eki noa. Thank you.
I don't have anything to say.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And our final speaker, John Roper. John, welcome. And speaking also to Petone Wharf.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm John Roper, long-time resident of Petone, and I've been in business for over 50 years in the construction-related industry with an office on the Esplanade almost opposite the wharf. My presentation firstly is to thank you for the positive response to keeping the wharf and also to emphasise the importance of keeping the impetus and move forward with urgency as time is of the essence, and the importance is to take away any obstacles that hampers the way of progress. The reasons for this is several. So it'll never be cheaper. Construction costs are increasing year on year. The average increases are running in excess of 5% per annum. With the current business climate, all companies are keen for work, which translates to more competitive tenders at sharper rates. The availability of experienced local contractors who have excess capacity is available. And currently the wharf has a fragility and deterioration. If left, this will cause additional non-budgeted remedial work before the repairs can be started. So given the importance of timing, I'd like to address the subject of resource consents. I'm no expert in consents, but would like to think that I have the experience and practicality and pragmatic approach to providing solutions. If you review the history of the wharf and the last 30 years of upgrades and remedial action taken, these have all been completed under the repairs and maintenance provided by the Lower Hutt City Council works request, thereby negating the necessity of obtaining resource consents. The work required to repair the wharf is a like for like with the previous work undertaken. I've taken the liberty of providing pictures of this work, which will give you an indication of the scope and complexity of the work that has previously been carried out. These relate to works carried out after the Kaikoura earthquake. You can see the complexity of the work, and again, I reiterate, this is all under the repairs and maintenance rather than resource consent. This work required a visually low impact and is like-for-like contract, which is what is required now. It is my thought that the most expeditious way of moving forward is under repairs and maintenance, which will allow for a more immediate start to the process. Having been involved with contracts which, whilst not in wharf repairs, I believe that careful contract management's scrutiny of expenditures, we have the possibility to reduce the amount of demolition with any from cost savings. The cost of resource consent savings would be a great start point to achieve this. Whilst the work is being undertaken, a consent for demolition of the sea end of the wharf could be started and submitted. Presumably, the consent could be dovetailed into the R&M timing to allow consistent workflow. Thanks for your time today, and in summary, I implore you to move forward under the umbrella of repairs and maintenance and not hold up the process with costly time and issues regarding resource consents. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. Any questions? Councillor Brown.
Thanks, John. Just a quick question. Getting started on the resource under repairs and maintenance, what if that starts and then we find that in the area that is the first part, the approach, needs a lot of work that will require a resource consent, and we've already spent a lot of money doing the repairs and maintenance?
Well, I don't think the resource consent aspect comes out because you've found something. It's the essential part is to do the work prior to, and that's why you've got the services of experts like Adam Thornton to be able to provide that information, which is not dependent on a resource consent. It's the same as what's been going on for 20 years, and you've seen the complexity that's involved, and that should be able to be covered under that process.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. That is all of our public submitters. So thank you very much for everyone who took the time to speak today. We will now move through to item 4, which is conflict of interest declarations. So is there any conflicts of interest members wish to declare? Councillor Briggs.
Just in my role as acting CE of Vibe, the Hutt Valley Youth Health Trust, as a member of the Chamber of Commerce, just acknowledging them as a speaker today. I don't think it prohibits me from participating, but I want it on the record.
It's very cautious of you, Councillor. Yeah. Very good. Any other conflicts? No? Okay. Thank you. Item 5. So this is recommendations to Council. Item 5A, progressing decisions on the final annual plan, and this is on page 7 of your agenda. We have Jenny Livshitz, our CFO, who is going to go through her presentation. Jenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so between Wendy and I, we're going to go through an overview of the annual plan papers in front of you today. We did distribute the slides yesterday, and so they are in diligent for you. Okay, so just briefly, the high-level timeline. So the slide here shows you all the key meetings and briefings that we've had in the preparation of the annual plan. The most recent meeting we had was on the 25th of March, and that was when you approved the draft annual plan and kicked off the engagement process. The community engagement ran from the 27th of March through to the 27th of April, and the purpose of today's meeting is really to receive that feedback, consider it, and provide initial direction and progress decisions to support the annual plan being finalised. On the 4th of June, we've got the council meeting to complete and finalise decisions on the annual plan. And then on the 27th of June, we'll adopt the annual plan and set the rates for the year. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Wendy now, who's going to take you through the engagement feedback.
Thank you, Jenny. Good morning, councillors. What we're here just to give you a high-level overview of what happened with the engagement process, and all the feedback is Appendix 4, which you received prior to the meeting. It was carried out. The engagement was carried out as we agreed in March, with involved sharing our draft annual plan, and also included information on fees and charges and a rates calculator tool. Submissions closed on 27th of April, and as we've noted, we received 46 submissions, and some of those came to speak today. The dominant themes were the opposition to paid parking in Petone, and excuse me, the impact of the ongoing rates rises. There were also some questions around the financial management, and that's been identified within the themes as well. So, and yes, everything else, sorry, is in the appendix there. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Okay, so just in terms of the big picture, high-level approach. So through the LTP process, we had a long, lengthy process at 18 months, and then had the LTP adopted in June 2024. There were a number of key challenges that were worked through as part of that LTP process. Aging infrastructure requiring significant investment, growing population, high levels of debt. Affordability and funding constraints were very much top of mind, and there was a need to carefully consider what we asked the community to pay for, particularly in the context of significant cost of living challenges for many in the community. So there was a strong focus through the LTP on trade-offs and prioritisation. So linking into this annual plan 25-26, Council direction has been that it's year 2 of the long-term plan, so there really should be limited changes. Overall strategic priorities remain in place, and similarly, the levels of service remain unchanged. We've had a range of financial challenges that needed solutioning, and the direction from Council has been to find offsetting mechanisms, and officers have worked hard to achieve that. So there's been a range of cost of pressure items that we've had to work through in the draft annual plan, and rates affordability has been top of mind, as I said. So there's a summary in the slide around some of the key decisions that have been made through the annual plan process, and there's also some appendices in the slide pack which break down those decisions and list all the cost savings as well in further detail. So just talking to a couple of the key points here on budget decisions. So the National Land Transport Program, NZTA funding, it was a drop in revenue of $22 million compared to what we had in the LTP. So you've worked through reprioritising the capital investment program, and you've agreed to rates fund a larger portion that had been in our LTP. At the landfill, you've increased CapEx by $23 million. Water services CapEx has been increased by $23 million. And in June 2024, we had the asset revaluation process finalised, and the flow-on impact of that has been baked into the annual plan, so that's higher depreciation levels. And across all the decisions you've made on cost savings, that's a total of $17.5 million over the 9 years remaining of the LTP. So those budgets have been adjusted to reflect those savings. So just a quick little reminder about the draft annual plan and where we got to with the rates increases. So we started with an LTP and a 13.4% rates increase for 2025-26. And through all the decisions you made, it landed at 12.8%. And so there was a number of items that pushed the rates higher and then others that reduced it. And so, for example, that National Land Transport Program decision that increased rates by 0.7%. And then some of the savings, the corporate leadership team savings target that reduced rates by 0.3%. And the other decisions you made around savings, a 0.6% reduction in rates. So jumping across now to the papers in front of you today. So where we've got to so far, and this is very much interim, pending your decisions. So if you take all the officer advice around the various items included in the agenda today, that would take the rates increase from the 12.8% in the draft annual plan through to 12.6%. And so the key items driving up rates in the papers, we've got the government-imposed water regulator levy. So we heard from Te Mata Arawai and Commerce Commission earlier this week. So that's a 0.3% increase in rates. Tanana Pool staffing costs, 0.1% increase. Standard & Poor's credit rating downgrade. So we've got higher borrowing costs as a result of that, 0.2% increase. And then there's a whole list of proposed delays and reshuffling out of capital program, and that brings the rates increase down by 0.9%. So that gets you to the 12.6. Okay, so the next 3 slides provide a summary of all the decisions in the papers today. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll just talk to a few items. So the first one there is the Wellington Water advice. So this is their final set of advice for us for this annual plan. Bruce is going to talk to this paper. Basically what you see there is some rephasing and some project updates. Also want to mention that from Wellington Water on the 4th of June, we'll have the Chief Executive of Wellington Water and also the board chairperson, and they'll be presenting and providing an update on their value for money program of work. Local water done well, so there's some proposed changes to and updates to the program to help complete that water services delivery plan and work through implementation costs. Basically, the funding for those 2 elements, there's some underspends in the current year that we're proposing to use for funding our project costs on our side of the fence, and then from the regional costs funding impacts is proposed to be debt funded, and that'll transfer over to the new water entity. So the next three items, I've talked to those already: water services regulator levies, the Standard & Poor's rating downgrade to Nainai Pool. Jumping across to the next page, so all of these items have basically got proposals of offsetting mechanisms and no rating impact. Huia Pool, changes being funded from the Contingent Facilities Management Fund. Ava Footbridge, so it's a capital investment of $5.4 million being added in with government funding of $2.4 million, and the balance being funded proposed from the Cross Valley Connections budget. Speed review reversal budgets, basically there is some NZTA funding associated with that, and the balance is proposed to be funded from the road network improvements budget. And then regulatory services, there's a reduction in forecast revenue with some offsets of costs that officers have identified. Okay, we've got Petone Wharf with a recommendation from the Community Cultures and Partnership Committee, work through that. Development contributions on the Valley floor, we've got Dwayne online available to support that paper, and we had a briefing last week where we talked through that in detail. And then finally, capital deferrals. So there's a whole range of capital deferrals, total of $31.5 million, and that reduces the rates increase by 0.9%. So as I said, the 4th of June meeting is the final meeting to make decisions on the annual plan. We do want to hear from council around any particular information and advice that we can prepare ahead of that meeting to support you with your decisions. It could well be some dialing back of some initiatives or some further projects you'd like to see pushed out. All of those add up and help with the rating impacts. A reminder about the rates increases that are baked into our financial modelling. So you can see the 10-year program there. So for the 25-26 year, as I said, we've dropped that from 13.4% in the LTP down to 12.6% so far. The capital investment program that rates as funding, it's a massive big program, $2.8 billion over the 10 years of the plan. That's what we're delivering through this annual plan and LTP. The latest annual plan's got an extra $43 million of CapEx included now. So you can see the big prominence in that slide of orange, that's all the Three Waters investment. The green is the transport investment. You've got Riverlink in there. You've got Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, all the wastewater and stormwater investment all baked into those budgets. And also the Ava Bridge is reflecting in those projections. So just briefly in terms of financial strategy elements and where we're landing with this latest projections. So compared to the long-term plan, our net debt to revenue ratio has moved up slightly. It's peaking at 221%. And in terms of the balanced operating budget position, with the higher depreciation and all the budget changes that have been updated, basically our balanced budget position is moving out and being achieved 4 years later than what we had in the LTP. So a long delay until 2031-32. The debt projections is one that we take, very careful consideration around. Debt's projected to go up to a peak of $1.1 billion, and the slide at the top there shows you the debt headroom capacity that we've got. In particular, of concern is the 2027, that constrained $128 million is all the capacity we've got left with this big capital investment program, so very, very tight. We've reported the water reform projections and the impacts of potential setup of the new water CCO to council previously, and we know that once that new CCO goes live, then this outlook changes quite dramatically and improves as we carve out all the assets and Three Waters investment program and revenue and so on. This picture improves dramatically. Balanced budget, that just shows you a bit more detail around that balanced budget position. And for 25-26, we've got a $60 million deficit. And then finally, the last two slides provide some information around the projected rating impact for 25-26. So you can see for average residential property with a value of $815,000, the rates increase would be on average a $8.90 increase per week or $463 per annum. And more than half of that increase all relates to the Three Waters infrastructure. And for the average commercial central property, an increase, a property value of $2.4 million, the increase would be $51 per week or $2,654 per annum. So I'll finish off there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So is there any questions based on that overview from Jenny? No? Okay, we can then move straight through to presidents of business. What we'll do, as we have done in the past, is work through the papers that we've got and then come back to the substantive paper and work through that. Make sense? Okay, so under Standing Order 10.4, we'll give precedence to items 5B to 5F. And just noting that item 5C, the Water Services Updated Investment Advice, will be considered at the end. Okay, I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Dyer. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no, declare that carried. Okay, 5B. So this is the development contribution charges, and we do have Dwayne online. So I'll ask yourself, and we've also got Deepu, who is available to answer any questions on this. But I'll pass it over to you, Dwayne.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. In terms of the slide pack, an updated slide pack was uploaded up to Diligent, I think, yesterday, which even further summarises essentially the paper. So that's really there for information. I don't intend to run through it today. In terms of the report itself, the paper and the options are essentially in response to some of the feedback you heard this morning in relation to consultation through the annual plan on fees and charges, and in this case, the development contribution charges. And in essence, you heard it today, it's a tough market out there, there's a downturn, and the concerns of developers in particular are that they may worsen if the next transition up in charges occurs on 1 July. And you can understand what's happened over the last few years and why the concerns are there. You've had prices fall, for house prices fall in the last couple of years. At the same time, inputs to development have increased across the board, regardless of what they are. Since the workshop, officers have given a bit more thought and consideration to the implications on the market and to the affordability of any remissions package or reduction, sorry, in the charges or delay in the increase. And essentially, if you go with options either 1 or 2, then the options that have been tabled today are basically to delay the transition instead of everything bumping up on 1 July 2026 to push out the transition and to loan fund the funding gap. In terms of the recommendations, we're really seeking direction from the committee about which of the 3 options you want to go with, and just noting that if you choose option 1, we'll need to put that into resolution 1, and if you choose option 2, we'll need to put that into resolution 1 and change the figure in resolution 2 to $750,000. And just noting the chair has recommended option 1. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Dwayne. Any questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Dwayne, I was just wondering if you have a view, a wider view across the country of what's happening in development markets elsewhere in the country and how councils are responding.
I don't have a view on how councils are responding, sorry, but I do know that the kind of downturn you're talking about might be a little more pronounced in Hutt City, but there is generally a market downturn in building consents being issued. One statistic springs to mind that in the 12 months of December 24, building consents for new dwellings were down 10% across the country. So it is definitely that market downturn kind of narrative the developers talk to you about is a nationwide one. I'm not aware of any councillors that have decided to review their development contributions charges as a consequence, but Hutt City is a slightly unique position because you had a transition from a lower charge to a higher charge preloaded into your policy.
And just a different question, Dwayne. What's the current government signalled in terms of changes to development contributions? I know they're talking about development levies now, water development contributions shifting into water entities. So what kind of changes are we to expect in the next few years?
Yeah, so the government generally has a philosophy of growth pays for growth, and that has been communicated several times. The government is proposing to introduce a thing called development levies. They largely share most of the DNA with development contributions, but they provide a bit more latitude for councils or water service organisations that use them to extend that beyond catchments that they already have defined. So if a developer turns up in an area you don't expect them to develop, you can still charge them. That won't be in place before 1 July 26. So the current legislation we have to operate under will see us out for this long-term plan. And even then, I understand it'll be a choice for councils and water service organisations as to whether they immediately move into development levies or stay with development contributions for another term or two. In terms of Hutt City's situation, you've got a water service organisation which is planned to be stood up and running by 1 July 26. And from that date, the water service organisation will determine the development contribution charges, and they will still be under the DC legislation, although slightly unique for them, from that date, at least until the government changes the rules. So next year, 1 July, the water service organisation will determine the charges. This, whatever you do today, will kind of set a new starting point, but you know, it would be fair to say across the Wellington region, you know, there is a drive to recover more of the growth costs from development. All I'd say is that Upper Hutt City and probably Porirua are pretty close to doing what they can already.
Councillor Stallinger, then Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a couple of questions. One is a bit of information from either Dwayne or our officers, because my memory is a bit short on this, as to what options we have if we were attracted to a particular development for the benefit of the city, significantly more housing, or an area that was, you know, we saw as being a really good fit. What options do we have to remit, postpone, defer development contributions at the moment? Is there none, or do we have some in our policy?
Through the chair, there are kind of three options that spring to mind. The first is you can change your policy in the future. You know, loft and large developments, for example, have a long lead-in time. So there is that option that's available. Probably realistically not one that's able to be done within 12-month window, though. Within more sort of normal operating times, you can do development agreements, but I would caution the use of those. They are largely, the legislation contemplates them being used where there is an infrastructure reason for resetting the charges in some way, but they do allow you to step outside the policy and establish a different or a bespoke set of charges and funding arrangements for infrastructure with a particular developer or developers if there's an alliance or a partnership. And the third one is that your policy does have a general remissions clause, which provides some discretion for, I think, the chief executive and the chairs of one of your committees to consider remissions in unique cases. But it's not limitless. It's not unfettered. Again, it talks about the purpose of development contributions to be, recover growth costs. And again, it kind of points to infrastructure reasons as being one of the reasons to consider remissions, where, for example, a developer builds maybe some kit that you already have planned. So it does have some guidance around where it's appropriate to use those. Hope that helps.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, my question probably relates to what you've just said, Dwayne. The developer representatives this morning were making the point that for larger developments, they put in wastewater, ways of dealing with wastewater on site to hold up the material, and we know that happens with stormwater as well. It's been said to us, but ultimately that sewage and stormwater has to be dealt with, and so there is that growth component. But are there other councils that tweak their development contributions based on a development being required to have some of those underground mechanisms in place on site and therefore relieving the load on their network? And I guess second question relates to what you just said about bespoke arrangements. Is falling under that bespoke arrangement situation, can you come to agreements with a developer based on, okay, you're putting in some wastewater handling infrastructure that will relieve some of the pressure on our network, and so therefore we can offer you a lower development contribution?
Yeah, sure, I can cover those. In terms of the reason for the discount, it's when, in terms of the development agreement, I was referring to whether the developer provides its own infrastructure, or mostly its own infrastructure, and from end to end, it provides that service. For example, it is not unusual for developers to provide new water source or treatment plants or all of their retic. It happens not so often in Hutt City, but it does happen around the country, in the Waikato and Auckland, for example. Not so much a situation where a smaller scale development is putting in some demand management into their individual development. In terms of your question around, do other councils have some recognition for that kind of site-by-site demand management? There are a few, and I do know this question comes up with a lot of councils. The majority, I believe, have fallen on the side of and I'm about to argue this point, that it's just part of the way we manage infrastructure now, and it's necessary to manage their flows and upgrade the infrastructure, and the whole lot is needed. There are some councils that do have some recognition for stormwater detention mitigation. I also know some of those councils are reviewing those provisions and removing them, because it's called hydraulic neutrality, but it's not entirely true. No development will be hydraulically neutral in the sense that it doesn't create more stormwater. It will, to be managed by the network. But what the tanks often do, both for wastewater and stormwater, is that they manage the peak flows. So there's a small portion of your overall management that helps control. So I guess if I were giving you advice on should you start thinking about trying to offer discounts for stormwater mitigation and wastewater mitigation on site, I mean, it would be good to have Wellington Water the room, but I would suggest they would support this position, which is it's all needed. Both the infrastructure you're trying to fund through your development contributions policy and the controls they put on place and how wastewater and stormwater enter into the system, it's all necessary to accommodate the growth you're talking about. And so offering a discount on one undermines your ability to fund the other.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Dwayne. Yeah, it was talked about this morning that the differences across the region. Has Wellington City changed in their last 12 months? They were based on household equivalent units and more than one bedroom, but I thought that had changed, so the fees had increased. Do you know if they've had a change in the last 12 months?
Through the chair, not the last 12 months. I think they reviewed their policy. Well, it might have just been 12 months ago, yes, and they increased their charges. They've got a new policy. Their previous policy was in place for a long time, unusually long. So they did review it, I think about 24 months ago. Maybe it was in place from 1 July 24, sorry. Their charges are still quite low in the context of Upper Hutt and Porirua, like often less than $15,000, including reserves. And I haven't seen anything on their website, and I was checking this morning when the speakers were talking, to see that they're upping them for the forthcoming financial year.
Any final questions before we consider the paper recommendations? No. Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, sorry, Dwayne, I'm not sure if you were on for public comment, but James Beban mentioned that our DCs don't include reserves fees, but lots of others do. I'm just wondering, has that been taken into your comparison around the region and around the country? Are we out of step with the rest doing it that way?
Certainly not. I mean, in rough speak, your reserve financial contributions, I think, are capped at $10,000, or at least they were previously. So if you take any of the charges we have in the DC policy and add $10,000, you know the maximum charge you're going to be covering for everything. In Upper Hutt, for example, their charges for the development of the city are roughly $24,000 plus the reserve financial contributions. So they have it as a plus as well. Wellington, the figure I just talked about was inclusive of reserve financial contributions, and in Porirua, they have charges of somewhere between $30,000 and $70,000, but they include reserve financial contributions. So I guess my view, at least regionally, is that Wellington is the outlier.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, Dwayne, as well. So we have some recommendations before us, and there is also a chair recommendation, which is to approve option 1, which would freeze the development contributions increase on the valley floor for 1 year. And so I'm happy to move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stellinger. Just to speak to that briefly, first off, can I say thank you to the two Sams and James who spoke here today. I think they all made a number of really good points for us to take into consideration as we consider this particular paper. I think James's points in particular of talking about the competitive edge that Lower Hutt did have in regards to our zoning changes, and that shift, as well as the economic environment and I suppose what's happening in the broader Wellington region with their own charges, has led to the position we're in. And I suppose if you were to compare some of our development rates prior to that bubble period maybe, or that influx that we had, then maybe some of those stats wouldn't be so stark. But we are where we are, and we just need to be able to navigate with I think the limited influence we actually have to acknowledge and support our developers as well, who are finding it tough out there, and certainly acknowledging that. So certainly I'm very happy to support this. The other reason would be that the operating environment will likely look very different in 12 months' time for the next council to consider, with development levies and the government changes there, and hopefully that will give some more options for the water entity and the council to consider and how development fees levies are paid for, and that may just change the game as well. So for me, holding now and hearing those concerns is a pragmatic way to demonstrate we are listening to that, but knowing that things will look very different in 12 months' time, and hopefully also the broader market situation will improve in the housing construction sector as well. Happy to open it up to the floor. Councillor Stellinger.
Thank you, and thanks for that recommendation, which I was happy to support. It's a very worrying situation just hearing what's happening at the moment with the market for housing development. As we know, there's a continuing need, and we've got targets we're seeking to hit as far as development of housing in the city. You know, the development contributions are large. I've often get the comment from people when this topic comes up, you know, but if a house is selling for $600,000 to $1 million, development contribution isn't that significant. But I'm aware from just the conversations with various of those involved in the sector that, you know, margins are so small that these amounts do make a difference, and are definitely considerations and can impact whether a profit at all is made on a development in the current market. So we do need to take it seriously. As I understand it, some developers have already shut up shop in the Hutt, but we're very lucky to have some strongly invested developers who are here locally of scale and are committed to our city and are pressing on as best they can to deliver new housing, just because it affects so many people. You know, the people that want a house, their advisors, investors, the trades. You know, it's a big factor in our economy. So we need to do what we can. I'm a bit disappointed we can't do more as far as helping out, but this is something we can at least do. I think it shows that we are listening to the concerns, responding at least in a small way, because it's important to keep faith, you know, and keep those relationships going strong. And I took the comments from Mr. Fasandia that he's keen to engage more with us, and so I hope that that does happen, and we find ways to work well together in the future. Just as a bit of a side, I have heard from another developer who's connected with our future strategy program, very complimentary of the work that's going on there, and so that is a positive. Just a final comment. My mind looked to the future when these DCs are in the hands of a new entity and we're one step removed, and I just got a little bit nervous, you know, whether the opportunity to have these discussions will be a bit more difficult for us to influence what the level of DCs are and be engaged. So I hope our mind is turned to that issue as we progress through that program as well. Thanks.
I think it was, I think, Councillor Mitchell and then Councillor Barrett and Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. Happy to support the recommendation, noting too that the rates impact, while there is one, is just a fraction of 1%, and I think that's something that we are to support our local developers. I think one of the reasons we're having this conversation today is because the housing market in New Zealand is such a court case, certainly in the last few years, with prices yo-yoing around and going up and down, and it just shows that we do have to be a bit agile in this space. I know we kind of set a policy a year or two back for a few years, but things change very quickly in the housing market in New Zealand. And very happy to support the local developers, noting that some of the non-local developers have already left town, but we should certainly be supporting them and thanking them for coming in today. And even regionally, I think, you know, there's push and pull between us and the other cities around the region, as we heard, and we can't control the pull from the other end. We can't control other councils' developer contributions or whatever incentives they have, but we can control the push end of things. And the last thing we want to do is push our local developers out into other areas. I do remain committed to the growth pays for growth principle, and as I mentioned, it's a central government principle too, and to steal another of their slogans, going for growth, I think that they use it, but it also, that's what we've been doing for the past few years, because at the end of the day, we know we need more houses in Lower Hutt, so we need to do our bit to ensure that that development continues for the next few years through this rough patch, and hopefully things get easier for our development community. And those warm, dry houses continue to be built in Lower Hutt.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of what I wanted to say has already been said, other than just recently at my local Rotary group, we had a developer come and speak to us. And what he was telling us was that the information we've heard today just goes this much to say how scary the prognosis is out there at presently. So in support of this recommendation, I would agree with Councillor Stallinger where he says that this goes some small way to say that we are listening and that we do care. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Kia ora, thank you. I'm probably going to be the devil's advocate today, and this is morally a really hard one for me because I really do believe in growth pays for growth, and I really respect the conversations that have been had today, and I do believe we are listening. And I think back when we first mooted the changes and we looked at the increase, and then we went back and said, no, we'll stagger that as a way to help and to mitigate that huge cost on the developers. I guess where I struggle a little bit today, and so I won't be supporting the recommendation 1 or 2, and I would prefer option 3, is that I know it's difficult for everyone right now. Everyone is feeling this economic climate and the impact of that. But as I go around talking to small local businesses, you know, in hospitality, and they look at the impact that they've been having and losing staff and all of these things, it's just been horrendous on so many levels. So for me, when talking to them, some of their comments to me were, yes, we're all finding it hard, and absolutely the developers are finding this extremely hard as well, but they would be better off if they had been developers, is what some of the narrative coming through to me is around that space. So with absolute respect, I would like to see us just stay with the status quo. I know it's a year, and
and we're going to have a new water entity. What is that going to look like? I don't know what that is going to look like in respect to those fees, those increases, or our ability to have real impact on that or influence on that, which I hope we will. What I also do agree with, though, is really working together more and consulting and talking about how we do, in a bigger term, longer term, strategic way, look after each other. So look after each other as partners, as developers, but also our other businesses as well who contribute. So I will be disagreeing and not voting yes for this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor, did I miss someone else before Councillor Dyer? Sorry, so Councillor Dyer, then Councillor Tupou.
Cool, thank you. Status quo is absolutely the wrong decision right now. In the current economic climate, if we don't get the growth, we don't get the DCs at all. I think this is a really good holding pattern for 12 months to water reform fundamentally changes the game. And we know from the report today that 90% of our DCs relate to Three Waters. I do share the same concerns as Councillor Stellinger of what input and oversight we're going to actually have in the future for these charges that the new entity charges. But I really hope there's an open process that does consider the impact of the whole region and acknowledging that there won't be price harmonisation around the water charges. I do agree that there does need to be some form of price harmonisation when it comes to DC charges, because the outer kilter around the region when different cities are charging differently does have a negative impact. So I think this hold is a really pragmatic way forward. So I'll be supporting the recommendation today.
I think it may have been Councillor Brown, sorry, Councillor Tupou. So Councillor Brown first.
Kia ora. I support the principle of growth, supports growth. However, in the last 6 years, we have had a lot of development in Lower Hutt. And while I don't subscribe to the tax relief for landlords will push down rents, I do subscribe to more houses, make it more available for people to get housing. And when it once was houses that were on the quarter acre, we're now building apartments. And while some people may look at them as it being dense, it is allowing people to get into houses, and it is what a lot of people in this environment want and need. And we need to continue building those houses so that, in my view, will make housing more affordable as we do it. The other big point for me is that it must be really difficult coming to the table to speak to 4 different councils who have got 4 different views, and they are quite divergent. So that's got to be a frustration and something that needs to be fixed in the future. But for the Hutt, we need to continue building those houses to make it more affordable. And it's certainly made a difference in Wainuiomata as it has in the Hutt. So, yeah, I'll be supporting.
Councillor Tupou.
Mr Mayor, I'll be supporting the motion today because my concern is for the families, the whānau, the people there that are needing to get into housing, as my colleague just said. And as a new homeowner myself, I understand the challenges and the length of time it takes. I've seen where I live in Wainuiomata, some sites that were earmarked and consented for development has stalled. Developers are trying to sell those plots of land. So I think this relief is timely. We've known to be a city of growth. The intensification that was mentioned was a cross-party solution to this housing crisis. So, Mr Mayor, I'll support it on that note. Kia ora.
Thank you. I will now put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Thank you. Moving through to item 5D. And those who are listening into that item, do feel free to go if you need to. I know you're busy people. Item 5D is Ava Pedestrian Footbridge, and this is on page 232 of the agenda. We've got Paul Hewitt to speak to this item, and also John is available, of course. Over to you, Paul.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor.
This paper seeks the recommendation to approve council's share of the funding to design and construct a replacement Ava footbridge. As council will be aware, the footbridge will be removed later this year to enable essential maintenance to be undertaken on the Ava rail bridge. And through those works by KiwiRail, it was not intended to replace the footbridge on the completion of the maintenance work. Following two options reports, a replacement clip-on footbridge would cost around $5.4 million to design, consent and install and construct. And that would bring the footbridge up to current engineering and consenting standards. Central government has confirmed it will fund up to $2.4 million in co-funding, and we're therefore seeking the balance of the $3 million contribution from council through this paper. On approval, future updates regarding progress for the footbridge would go through the Infrastructure and Regulatory Committee. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, we've got a few hands. I'll start from my left. Councillor Edwards.
Thanks, Paul. The preliminary costs, and they're very preliminary, we haven't done the designs yet, but are they based on a like-for-like, other than it being a clip-on, are they based on a like-for-like width of bridge and standard of service, or are we going for something that could accommodate, you know, wheelchairs and more room for cyclists?
With the current standards and requirements, it would be an increased width, more to a shared path standard to enable people to pass safely on the bridge. Obviously, the existing bridge has only got the two narrow lay-bys, so this would increase the width. But obviously, yeah, once we've got developed those designs, they'll come to council for approval.
I think that answered a few questions on this side. Great. Councillor Mitchell.
It did answer my question, but I'll just put a quick point on that one, which is that I was concerned about it because in paragraph 15, it talked about how we had budgeted for a multimodal bridge. However, the entire rest of this paper talks about a footbridge. So I just wonder if there's a different way we can talk about it moving forward when we're talking to our community as well, that it is more than what's there currently in it. Certainly, we had feedback from the public as well, from residents, that the current bridge is already used for cycling and other modes. So just make it really clear that we're planning something a bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, just on that point, I think it's probably being used that way because it's the easiest way to explain to people what we're talking about. But I think moving forward, I think if we can take that on board, because as you say, just purely due to the standards we're required to do, and we would want to do them anyway, it will be an improvement on what's currently there. And yeah. Okay, Councillor Dye.
Yeah, I know it's super early days, but when I hear the words clip-on, it kind of sounds temporary or possibly relocatable. Is there any thinking about it being a structure that could be relocated to Waioni Street or something once CBL comes into place, or?
Through you, Chair, thanks, Councillor. There was some initial scoping done by KiwiRail around what the costs of a standalone would be, and it's significantly greater than this. So that was the first part. We looked at that option as well. In terms of clip-on, it depends on what's happening with Cross Valley and the alignment that comes back from Waka Kotahi. But given the standards, it would be very difficult to shift it, and the length and the weight, etc. Pretty much impossible, I suspect. So whilst it is clip-on, it will be permanent clip-on.
Councillor Morgan.
Kia ora. And just lastly from me, and I think we've discussed it already and it's been in your plan now down the track, that that accessibility piece is really, that lens is very clear, and that disability, especially listening to our speakers today about that being very, very important. So thank you.
Okay, if that's all the questions, then we'll go through to the paper in front of us. You'll see that I have an additional chair's recommendation, which we'll just pull up on the screen if that's okay, so everyone can see it. That additional recommendation is just asking officers to report back around confirmed timeline for the project, and with a focus being on the best alignment with the maintenance work being undertaken by KiwiRail. Now, I know that that would have happened anyway, but I know, but that is the most common question now coming back from members of the community. So I will move those 4 recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards. Just to speak to this, Can I say that it's been great to have another example of the council and central government working really well together to find a solution. When we look at back in October, November, when Kiwi Rail told us that, hey, the footbridge is closing, it's all happening, sorry, but that's sort of not our problem. To now get to a point where we are working hand in hand. And I think also Kiwi Rail would acknowledge the efforts of this council to work with them, and mostly behind the scenes rather than starting a petition and all the sorts of things that often happen with these types of issues. So just an acknowledgement of the team. Paul, your work on this has been outstanding, working with Kiwi Rail, and obviously having a Member of Parliament who happens to be the Minister of Transport's been helpful as well. But we need to acknowledge that contribution that they've looked to make here. So it gives me pleasure to be able to move those recs. Any other conversation, any other discussion? Councillor Stallinger.
Yes, just to also congratulate all the officers and those who've been involved, including yourself, Mr. Mayor, in this discussion and negotiation, I'm sure, at times. Fantastic outcome. As someone who's tried to get across there on a bike before, you just pray no one comes the other way. So that's an excellent improvement as well, to have that, changed to a wider width. Of course, it's some more spending, but I think it is a very valid use of Cross Valley Link connections. I mean, it is a vital connection across Valley, because there's a long gap between the other bridges to get across. So yes, all round just great news. So congrats.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate everybody, especially the officers, for this. Working alongside Kiwi Rail's no easy task. A big behemoth of a group, and it was almost like having to make wine out of water, which is what you all did. So thank you for your work.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Thank you, team. So you will stay here though. So we now have item 5E, which is the speed limit reversal paper, page 237. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This paper is seeking approval to fund the speed limit reversals required by the Speed Limit Setting Rule 2024. As Council will be aware, a number of speed limit changes were made around the city over the last few years following the previous 2022 rule, and under the new rule there is a requirement to reverse those permanent speed limits and create temporary speed limits around schools. The estimated cost to implement the changes is around $325,000, and NZTA have confirmed a funding assistance rate of 51% to help move this through. It is proposed that the funding to implement the changes is offset by the roading network improvements budget, and they'll be split over 2 years. Looking ahead at the works required planned under that budget included a signalised crossing on Pomari Road near the railway station, improvements to the Langs Road, Myrtle Street improvements, as well as improvements to roads where we have issues with antisocial driving. This was a provisional list of works to be brought forward to Council in time. If this, to offset this funding, it's most likely that based on the prioritisation of these works, some of the, at least one of the sites for the antisocial driving behaviour would have to be deferred to a later year. Happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Shaw, then Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks for the report, Paul. What I'm a little bit concerned about is the confusion that will possibly arise from these changes. It doesn't seem that long ago that we've just put the signs up and now we're going to change it. So what sort of comms plan will we have to go out to our community to allay that fear?
Transport officers are currently working with the comms team to pull together the notifications that will go out, particularly to the schools. These will be sent out to elected members, expect later this month, to review prior to any communications going out wider to the schools. So you elected members will have the opportunity to view that first.
through you, Mr. Chair, and also in terms of the wider public, there will be plenty of notification ahead of the changes taking effect and when. So there'll be a staggered date because we won't do all of them at the same time. But more than ample notification of when those changes are going to go, and how that works will be part of that plan. Whether we use the boards that we use to convey messaging, as well as obviously the post, various other elements as well.
In those comms plans, can we just have the really large logo of the New Zealand government? Yeah. Brought to you by no. No, Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, from memory, when we rolled out those school speed changes last year, there were some schools we didn't get to. And this paper's silent on those other schools where clearly there's no speed limit reversal to be made, but I was just wondering, do we have the budget in place and will we be rolling out changes to those other schools at the same time and making this a full package?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Chair. The intention is that for the schools that didn't have any speed reductions put in place, we'll still have to implement the changes around the school gates for temporary speed limits at the school gates. So that is included as part of the budget for this work.
That's in this package here?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Thanks for this. The 30km/h restriction on Jackson Street gets caught up in this, as I understand it. We have to reverse it. Do officers think there's a case to be made on those safety grounds that can provide an exception to these new directions from the government? Can we make a case that, given high pedestrian counts and cars reversing out of car parks, that 30km/h on safety grounds is entirely suitable for Jackson Street?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Chair. With respect to Jackson Street, that road didn't fall into the exemptions that were available through the speed setting rule, unlike Marine Drive, which was discussed previously. To put in a 30km/h speed limit through Jackson Street, we would have to revert through to the processes required under the speed setting rule 2024 to go through a process to reduce the speed limit on Jackson Street based on the various environmental considerations on that road.
And would it be expensive to do that?
Couldn't tell you at the moment, to be honest. It's a new process. We haven't worked through it yet.
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. You mentioned that there'll be notifications to the schools coming soon about the changes. When this last came to us, we asked officers to work with the schools, as there is a small amount of scope where we can do some things to retain some safety improvements. Have we done that, or are we still proposing to do that?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Chair, we're still proposing to do that. The communication that goes out to the schools will be seeking feedback on what is proposed around have we got the school gates correct and so forth, sign locations and what have you. So this communication that goes out to the schools will be the first step in that process to make sure we get this right.
And that will be very clear about what the parameters we can, like the most important one to me is that where there's a corner of a street and it's not close enough to the gate to warrant it, that we actually are allowed to extend it beyond the gate. It'll include the parameters of what the school can do. Yep, great, thank you.
Okay, we good to go into the recommendations? Okay, so I'll move recommendations 1 through to 4. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Mitchell, any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, happy to support the recommendation and meet what's required of us. As you mentioned, from the central government, Mr. Mayor, I don't think any of us think this is a good use of ratepayers' money. And I think worth noting too that for every $1 of ratepayers' money we're spending on this, the government's spending another $1 of taxpayers' money through the NZTA subsidy. However, we do need to kind of comply with these changes. Interesting to note that in a perverse kind of way, there's a win in this for antisocial drivers by us losing our budget to intervene where we can on that. I mean, I guess there's a watching brief on that one. We'll see how busy that car crushing machine down in Seaview gets over the next few years, and maybe the problem would be resolved by central government. But it's just another example, I think, of where we seem to be working at odds with each other, or certainly not working together on these issues that including the antisocial driving one, that we kind of seem to be pulling in different directions on this one. So it'd be good to see some more coordination from our central government, working with local councils to deliver more appropriate solutions to these problems than this kind of to and fro we have at the moment.
Councillor Parkin?
I'm just going to signal that I can't in good conscience vote for this. Yes, I know that that means that we will be out of step with what the government's requiring us to do. But the consequences of us changing the funding to this, meaning that we are now not funding a pedestrian crossing on next to Pomare Station, where we have had a death, just does not sit.
Sorry, Councillor Parkin, sorry, that's not correct. Just so in
Okay,
case anyone
thank
listening
you.
in, so.
That was not the location of that one?
No.
Okay, no apologies. I'll withdraw then.
Let's go. Do we just want to clarify that? Just
Through you, Chair. So basically, that what we've put forward is what's included in that particular cost code. So that crossing is in that code, that we would be, moving forward with that. What it means is that most likely one of those 3 to 4 antisocial vehicle sites we would not be able to progress with. So absolutely, the Pomare crossing is a high priority that would go ahead, but it's it is, as Councillor Mitchell said, whether it's Harcourt, Wherry, Gracefield, Seaview, or wherever, one of those sites would drop out where we have the undesirable behaviour occurring at the moment.
Cool. Sorry to cut you off, Councillor Parkin. Did you want to make any other comment?
No, it still doesn't sit well with me that the central government is forcing us to do this. I've made my views clear on that, but thank you for the clarification on that.
I certainly agree with that sentiment. Councillor Edwards.
No, I didn't want to say anything other than I wish there was an option where you could vote with extreme reluctance. Yeah.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I will reluctantly support this as well because it's the law. But this is yet another example of an unfunded mandate from the government, and it's not even the only one in today's paper. And let's not forget we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of our residents' money rolling out these safety improvements. We're now going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars again reversing them, and I think it's completely backwards.
Okay, if we pull can we pull these recommendations up? Just to capture the sentiment of the room, I'm going to make a small amendment. So, yeah, there's, oh yeah. Has anyone got a suggestion to with severe reluctance or severe or
You need to say why.
with reluctance, okay.
You want to receive and note the report and expresses its dismay that this unfunded
Reluctance.
mandate has been forced onto councils.
Reluctant, so we'll go option 3, which is reluctantly approves the unfunded mandate imposed by government, which requires the net funding of 0.1 million, 1.7. What? Sorry, 0.17. So reluctantly approves the unfunded mandate by government. Requiring net funding.
Yeah, that works.
Happy with that? Okay. Councillor Mitchell.
Could I just move an additional amendment if we're going there? For number 4 to include noting that this money would have been better spent on other safety improvements.
Yep. On
other safety improvements is what I thought.
And that is correct. I think that's fine. Yep.
Yeah, the only question is.
Yeah, noting but for government requirements, this money would be better spent. Yeah. We're really turning the screws in. Yeah. Okay. So I'll with the happy. It has been moved in second. We're happy to adopt those amendments. Great. Okay. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried unanimously. Okay. Moving through, if we don't mind, are we happy to go through till 12 o'clock? We have gone for a couple of hours. We can just get through these papers. Yep, great. Okay, so now we move through to item 5F, which is the Petone Wharf options. Andrea. And Arthur as well. Great. So I know things were covered pretty well at the committee level. Obviously very keen to hear any updates that you have since that committee meeting for us, and we'll go from there.
So initially, thanks very much, Worship and councillors, for inviting me here to have a conversation around this. This is a long-standing issue, as I'm sure we're all aware of, and I've only been here a very short time, but seriously, no, it's an important matter. We'll take it that the report has been read. There is a couple of adjacent matters to the report that would probably merit some conversation. So I'll probably start with that. The first thing I would like to say is I think there's been a really good engagement with the Petone Community Board. The Petone Steering Group particularly saved the wharf in a real constructive manner moving forward. So that I think has allowed us to move quite well forwards. And with that, I suppose, involvement and engagement at the Community Culture and Partnership meeting of the 30th of April, just gone, there was generally supported that option 2, which was a part remediation of the wharf, go ahead. PCB, Petone and the steering group were at that meeting. There were, of course, I mean, it's a really important matter to the community. So, as you would expect, there were a couple of individual presentations who still wanted to go for the full thing, but I think it would be fair to say that the vast majority of the community have accepted where we've got to with this. Moving on from there. We were directed to hold the pre-consent meeting as soon as possible after the meeting at the CCP. We actually did that 12th, so we did that Monday, just gone. And on that basis, I've got a little bit to report back about that meeting, which again, if you'll bear with me as a group, I'll whip through what I can here. So you recall initially that there was a proposal to look at a repair consent and a remediation demolition type consent thereafter. After talking to the consenting authorities, there was some discussion from GDRC that some of that might be achievable, but there was concern that it would be difficult to assess where something moved from a repair through to a renewal and or a demolition. Another issue, as far as GWRC was concerned, was around, should we say, managing costs and managing the process moving forwards. HCC was reasonably unequivocal in stating that whatever we did would require a consent. So the general view from that meeting was that probably the repair aspect would be put to one side and would look more to an initial rehabilitation and remediation consent. Good news on that is that subsequent conversations with the consenting authorities at that meeting suggested that a HCC consent might be achievable within 2 months, and a GWRC consent might be achievable. They weren't specific, but they said several months. So we've managed to narrow that time frame down quite a little bit. That said, that is the actual consenting process, not the work we've got to do prior to achieve that consent. But nevertheless, a significant improvement from where we were. So in general, the consensus from the meeting was that we would look towards getting a rehabilitation and a remediation consent for the first 200 metres of the wharf, the approach, as that doesn't really involve demolition, which is the more problematic area this process. And secondly, after that, the second stage of that would be to look at the remediation and the potential demolition of elements of the wharf head, which is a bit more complex from a consenting point of view. So that was what was agreed generally from everybody in the meeting, including Save the Wharf. We're keen on that as well. Well, we're happy with that proposal. In terms of the consents, the GWRC one, and I won't go into too much longer on this, will be interested around heritage and recreation effects. And on that basis, there's still a bit of work for us to do with Heritage New Zealand to make sure that we do get a clearly specified piece of work. If we don't achieve that, then obviously it'll add to the time to get the consent. So the idea is obviously to get the best, should we say, specification for that moving forward, so that the Heritage New Zealand can sign off on it. That really is the GWRC position. The HCC position was more around building effects. And whilst the majority of the wharf is in GWRC area, there is at the front end of that, the first 40 metres or so is HCC. So there may still be the requirement, even though once we've achieved the initial approach, resource consent, there may still be a need for HCC to be involved in the demolition element, even though it's not within the HCC area. That said, yeah, it was identified that there would be a strong possibility that we could potentially start both of these consents off in parallel. So it doesn't necessarily mean we'd have to get the approach consent and then wait before we applied for the wharf head remediation and demolition consent. That's probably the major areas of the discussion from that meeting. I'd say generally pretty constructive, and everybody who was there had an interest of moving this matter forwards and opening the wharf if that was going to be at all possible. So next steps from our perspective is essentially if council endorses the finding from the CCP committee, then we will look to progress option 2 initially with another meeting with Heritage New Zealand to clarify exactly what it is they want to hear, or they want to be in that consent. There has been another couple of reports required. Another condition report, which we'll have to do because the last one was done in 2021, so we obviously need to understand if there's been any further serious deterioration. And GWRC was particularly interested in an avifauna assessment, essentially birds roosting and so on and so forth. That probably brings to the end the feedback from the meeting, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Arthur. Really appreciate that. Councillor Shaw, then Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, Arthur, and well done on the communication. I think everyone's pretty positive about the direction that we're heading in. Just a question from one of our earlier speakers, John Roper, suggested that it was possible that we could start earlier if we use the repairs and maintenance budget, I think we put it. Is that possible for any parts of this project, or it all needs to be consented?
That matter was discussed in great depth at the meeting on Monday. As I say, GWRC, who are one consenting authority, thought that possibly some might be able to be done, but then there was serious concerns about when a repair might actually move into a rehabilitation, which would require consent, or move into a demolition. So it suggested that there was probably not a great deal of real merit in pursuing that, because it could be even more problematic. But even more than that, HCC were quite clear that it's going to require a consent. So it would not probably be the greatest piece of work to try and apply two different approaches at the same time. Given that the time frame for this has reduced quite considerably, then assuming we get our side right, then hopefully we should be able to move it through a lot quicker.
Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Dye.
Thank you. I do have a few questions on this one. I'm not on the Communities Committee, but I watched the meeting and read the papers and absorbed all that information. The first question I have is, the costing to date has been based on averages, and I understand why that approach was taken, but they're not real costs until we go out to tender. So, and it is a complicated project, and in terms of those consents that we might be required to get different consents and the tendering process, where does the tendering process fit in with the timeline?
So again, it's something we would be looking to move on reasonably quickly, but we'd like to see how we're progressing on the consent side of things first. There is some degree of risk still, but at least we've got a reasonably clearly defined process, i.e. an initial consent for the consent and then a secondary consent for the potential demolition and work required on the wharf head. So we should be able to wrap that up into a tighter tender approach. We probably wouldn't have been able to do that if we'd just launched into a repair.
Thank you. And the nub of my thinking really is, and I like the approach of how the length of the wharf can kind of come and go to fit in with the envelope that we have to repair it. I think that's a very sensible approach. And my real question is, will the tendering process be flexible enough that actually someone could tender to repair the whole wharf?
So again, I've got to be quite straightforward. Nothing we have seen thus far in the work we have done has suggested that we would be able to remediate the entire wharf. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we may have missed something, but the information we've had up to this point suggests that. So if I was to say anything else, I would probably not be able to say that 100% seriously. So we have an approach that's supported generally in the community. It will resolve a long outstanding issue, and it will protect a much valued heritage and cultural icon for Hutt City to a certain extent. So I can't give you an absolute and say we will be able to do it. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, and that's why my question is about flexibility, because it was noted in the paper. I mean, presumably there were a few companies involved in this pricing process, but not all companies who could do this work, for one, so there might be someone else out there. Also noting the range of, so we took an average, but looking at the construction estimates and the range, actually the lowest price in there of $8.8 million, if you add on the contingency and the fixed cost, does come in under $12 million. So there's companies we haven't heard from yet. It's a very competitive thing. There might be local companies who want to do it, do a good deal out of goodwill for our community. So my question really is, will the tender process be flexible enough that if that is an option, we're not ruling it out at this point in time?
As right from day one, if that is doable, then obviously we would look at doing it. I think I'm just trying to stress quite strongly that the information we've had to this point suggests we probably won't be able to do it. But again, I say that does not mean that it disqualifies that particular outcome.
Councillor Dye.
Thank you. Like Councillor Mitchell, I'm not on the committee as well, but have watched the meeting and read the papers, obviously. So just a couple of questions from me. This will obviously go to tender now based on the decision made today. Will that come back to this committee before it goes, the work starts, once we know sort of what length we can actually get for the 12 mil? Obviously I understand the work that's happened with sort of the costings we've done to estimate, but will that come back to the committee, or once this is signed off, is it underway?
Normally, as long as we're operating within the allocated budget, it wouldn't come back for an approval, but we certainly would intend to keep council well updated on how that's going.
Awesome, thank you. And great that early discussions have been happening with the consenting authorities. The report suggests that a resource consent can be flexible enough to facilitate an increase or reduction in the remediation as possible within the budget. In those conversations with the consenting authorities, is that going to be possible to get a consent that allows for flexibility as we work, or are they going to want some certainty as to how far out into the coastal marine area we're actually going?
So the initial approach, so in all scenarios, we're looking at retaining the approach. So that goes without saying. There's still a little bit of debate around whether we could do a flexible approach, as you've indicated there, or whether on the basis of the information we get back, we look to say this is the remediation we want to do, and then amend it if we need to amend it through that process as an entirely separate consent. Then there may be options like there is in any other consent to do those amendments and changes.
Cool, thank you. And then the final one from me. When we've been talking about the wharf for a long time, but when this first came to the table, there were some concerns around the like-for-like replacements using hardwoods and where they would be sourced from. Has that been part of any of these conversations lately, or are we still looking like that's what we're going to have to use?
So one of the crucial things that I haven't really got a full update on at the moment is clearly Heritage New Zealand have got a high interest in this. As I said, from our next meeting, we would want to speak to Heritage New Zealand and just be clear what it is they see as being appropriate. The general idea is to replace hardwood where we can replace hardwood. There was a conversation that we could potentially use some of the hardwood from the Point Howard demolition. But again, we can't definitively say that because we need to understand whether it fits the particular mould for this particular project. But clearly, where we can, and the general thrust of the discussion is that where we do need to do some replacements, and these are pile heads, which are particularly, this is the area where the pile joins the deck. Quite a few of those are quite badly worn, and certainly the thrust of the process thus far is where we are doing pile head replacements. It will be hardwood, yes.
Thank you so much for the report. It's made this decision much easier. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we are going to move to the recommendations now that are in front of us. We do have some edits just to reflect what has happened since the committee meetings. So we have changed recommendation 13, 14 and 15, and with these noting recommendations. Okay, happy with those noting recommendations? I think they reflect what has happened since. No, sorry, there was replacing 3 recs. Yeah, with 2. Okay, so I'll move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan. Just to speak, I would say thank you to everyone who has been involved in this process since the decisions of the long-term plan committee. I think to get to a position where the community groups who have been advocating for the Petone Wharf, obviously the use of our independent advisor, Adam, and also the council officials and working together to get to this point has been really positive. And I'm really happy to see the progress that was made at that pre-consent meeting as well, and it appears that we're all on the same track. What I would say is that we need to look at the past of when we have undertaken these projects with our wharves. They are unpredictable, they are challenging, and there will no doubt be some hard conversations as we actually undertake this project. But I certainly think that with goodwill, working together, understanding each other's position, particularly council's position of that budget cap, we will be able to make the best of this, I think, in getting a good outcome and for retaining as much of Petone Wharf as possible with that budget. So I certainly am very pleased to be able to support this and to give some certainty and actually to make a final decision on the Petone Wharf as well, which I think is well overdue. Happy to open it up to the floor. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, look, notwithstanding our long history of discussion on this and the commitments we gave in the long-term plan for that $12 million envelope and the excellent work that their officers have done on this, I am only just across the line, millimetres across the line, in voting in favour of this, because I contrast this project with, just to give one example, another item on our agenda papers today, where we are having to defer the next stage of work on pipes in Knights Road that we strongly suspect are leaking sewerage and E. coli into our aquifer. And for me, I know what my priority is. This project is full of risks. The Mayor has mentioned previous experience with wharfs costs escalating. I'm truly alarmed by the estimate of a 55% chance of liquefaction in the next 25 years, making this wharf irrepairable. I don't know how much use we're going to get out of it. I'm sure all councillors are very aware of our rapidly rising debt. And so were it not for the Three Waters changes that are coming up that would put our infrastructure, pipe infrastructure, reservoir infrastructure on a much more stable footing, I would vote against this for sure. But for me, there have been enough people demonstrate to us, all the people in the city also know some of these aspects that I've been talking about, and yet still large numbers say they want that wharf at least partially repaired. So I will vote in favour on that basis.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, happy to support this recommendation too, and I take I certainly acknowledge the points well made by Councillor Edwards, but take a different view on this, or a different perspective on this, which is that actually we're honouring a commitment we made to the Petone community in our long-term plan. And we did give them a lot of say over how they wanted a particular envelope of money spent, and this was their priority. So I think for me, even if we're sitting here today deciding to demolish Petone Wharf against the community's will, within that pot of money, we wouldn't be saving the money, we'd be redirecting it back into another of the projects that we were doing down there anyway. So I don't think we'd ever be bold enough to be taking a savings by cancelling this project. But just like to acknowledge the community who have been very steadfast in their views on this, and certainly feels, as you said, Mayor Barry, that things are a lot clearer now than they were even a year ago when the community was trying to save that wharf, but it felt like we were kind of clutching at straws at that point in time. It's a lot clearer now how we can progress and get this project done within the budget that we already committed to it. So happy to support today's recommendations.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, this has been one of our highest priority areas that's been with us now for several years. And there wouldn't be a councillor around the table, except for the one maybe who's missing, Deputy Mayor Lewis, who hasn't had concerns about this at one level or another when we're facing the decisions we've had to make and will still have to make. However, for this item, this is one of the times where the community have truly spoken time and time again when we've raised concerns as councillors as prioritising our funds within our rates on what we can charge. So this is truly a collective action work by the community saying that how important this is. And as Councillor Mitchell said, we did prioritise this and we did confirm our commitment a while back, and that we have got this set of envelope of money to get on with doing what we can. And as Arthur has clearly articulated, we still don't know fully what we can looks like until things are commenced. So I support it, but I particularly want to acknowledge the work that's been done by the supporting groups, by Save the Wharf, the Petone Community Board and Petone Group, as well as Deputy Mayor Lewis, and particularly Sylvia and Pam, who have been so articulate in leading this work and leading the groups, at times being pragmatic, but being really clear on the direction they want to make. So yeah, I'll be supporting it and acknowledge the strong work of the community.
Yeah, but Councillor, a few other hands. Councillor Briggs, Councillor Tupou, Councillor Stallinger.
Thank you, Mayor Barry. Yeah, following on from our colleagues, supportive today of the recommendations before us. It has been a long time coming and significant work and also angst that's come along the way. I think during this experience, there's been a lot of uncertainty, both for us as the decision makers for the city, but also for the community. And hopefully trust has been reformed and acknowledged that through this process, we've been working on best information. And we've got more information, as Councillor Mitchell alluded to, than we did 12 months ago. I think one of the pragmatic steps that we did make was putting a clear budget envelope and not just letting it continually grow and grow and expectations grow beyond reality. And so because of that, we've now got to a point where even with still some uncertainty and some risk through the tender process, we'll be able to know what we're going to get for the budget cap that we've put in place. So that gives not only a clear message to our community, but also to those participating in the tender that our coffers are not limitless, and we will be working to the budget that's been set. I know that for some, this is not all that they wanted, but that's the reality and that's the trade-off. Because if it wasn't a meeting in the middle and a way forward, it would have likely been more demolition, if not complete demolition of the wharf. So I think where we've landed today is got good support from the community for most part, and I see most, if not all, councillors supporting this today as well.
Councillor Tupou, then Councillor Stallinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And hearing Pam speak and talk about how many years we've been discussing the wharf, and certainly since the beginning of my time in local government. And so, as I said at the committee meeting, Mr. Mayor, there's a bit of a mummy there in that place and space. With all the signage there, I'm looking forward to the day that we can take those down. Because it's representative, it's a symbol of something that's not so much just broken, but where we need some resolve. So I think we as a council, in response to that, have taken us as far as we can. Yes, it was mentioned sometimes with deteriorating assets, whether it be at home or commercial or otherwise. Sometimes the more we look, the more we find. So I'm not holding my breath yet, but we'll address that when it comes. But I think that we've taken reasonable steps as far as we can to rectify this and address these years of concerns from the community. And we can all recall the day from the rangatahi and the school kids right through to our senior citizens. So seeing Pam here, making the effort to speak, and just that being a tohu of the many years that have gone into this, I support it. Kia ora.
Councillor Stallinger.
Yes, I'll be supporting this as well. I agree with all the comments that have been made around the table. I would say that, like Councillor Edwards, this is not what I would consider a top priority spend for the next 10 years, given the other things on our plate. But for the reasons expressed, I think we need to press ahead. I would just add to that, I'm really taking a long-term view on this. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in our harbour, in our vicinity, and there'll be a time in the future where we would really wish we had kept this wharf if it's no longer there with how spectacular Petone has the potential to be down by the beach. So yes, as I said, I'll be supporting the recommendation as well.
Okay, Councillor Dyer, and then we will put it to a vote.
Cool. I'll keep this very short because I share the sentiment of everyone that's spoken before me, particularly Councillor Edwards, with the concerns that this report does highlight and that there are a lot of risks involved. So yeah, happy to support it. But I did want to acknowledge the pragmatism of the community groups that have come to the table, because they have shifted a long way from when they first came to this table, as have we. So just wanted to acknowledge that.
Okay, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Sorry, can I ask for division, please?
Division? Okay. So we'll go by division. It might actually be quite easy based on the committee vote anyway. So I'll just say, all those in favour raise their right hand. That's everyone. So just tick everyone's name. Yeah. Happy with that? Except for the Deputy Mayor. Who,
Did you notice that?
I think, I think she's just sent me a message into my brain saying she votes in favour. So
You're all about to implode.
she's very much in support. Great. So I declare that carried. Thanks, everyone. So we are past 12 o'clock now, and we didn't quite get to the water papers, but I'm conscious we do need to have a break. I propose, Bruce, we do have people online. Do we want to, are we okay then? If anyone does need to go take a toilet break, how about we just do a quick 5-minute break, Bruce, just to let anyone go to the bathroom, and then we'll come back and we'll have a longer break after. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll get back into it. We are going to have a longer lunch break shortly, but we do have the team from Wellington Water waiting for us online, so we don't want to hold them up. So we are now on to item 5C, which is on page 221 of the agenda. And I'll ask Julie to... Bruce, are you going to kick us off? And we've got Julie. Yeah, great.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Julie and Sukin here who will be able to answer any questions. And in the interests of time, I don't intend to talk to this paper. You've read it. The only comment that I make is that as we move through the year, we do get changes with the water program because it is so large. And so as new information comes in, there are changes. And so this paper talks to those changes and recommends some shifting around of budgets to accommodate that within the envelope that we have. Now, what I'd say to you is that this is, to some degree, an academic exercise when we're looking out in years, 2 to 10, because what we have put in the investment profile for the WSDP is not what is necessarily in this paper. And so we, in the knowledge that a new organisation would be able to fund more work, there is more work that has got more investment that will go into the WSDP. So just understand in considering this paper that it'll probably be a different ball game in 14 months' time. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Bruce, I think you've kind of covered this, but just to be clear, we have this type of report through each annual plan, right? With those types of changes you're talking about.
Yes, we do. So this is the third tranche of information that has come through from Wellington Water. We had some in December, February, and now here. And at each point, we do get changes. And we will have changes when we move through the year. And so you'll recall last December, we also made changes to the current program. So it's likely that this December we will have a half-yearly report that says, hey, we need to make some further amendments to the program.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Bruce before we pass it to Julie and the team and Sukin? No? Okay, Julie.
I'm just going to say that Julie and Sukin are there to answer any questions, really. I don't know whether they've got any more to add at this stage.
Okay.
Although I don't want to take the words out of your mouth.
Any comments you want to make, Julie?
Just here to answer questions. I just want to thank Bruce again for working with us so collaboratively and closely. It's really appreciated. And to Council for the size of the programme that you are looking at. It is it's really helpful for for the risks that you're carrying. So thank you.
Okay. Any questions from members? We'll go. I've been going to Councillor Mitchell quite a bit early, so I'll see if there's any other hands that go up first. No? Oh, yes, Councillor Edwards.
Just a sort of kind of a minor one that's in the appendix. It's either my memory once again having a lapse or this is a wrong figure. I'm misunderstanding it. It talks about, and notwithstanding Bruce's comment that the whole ball game will be changed in 40 months' time, but it talks about having to cut back on our pipe renewals to a slower rate, but below necessary level of renewal of 9 kilometres a year. I thought the necessary level of renewal or the sustainable level of renewal is more like 30 kilometres an hour, and I'm wondering, what we're going to be dropping it to below 9.
So the 9 refers to the water pipes only. It doesn't refer to wastewater and stormwater. So the cumulative figure is probably closer to 25 to 30. And in answer to your first question, yes, in order for us to be able to bring forward the reservoir project in Wainuiomata and increase the investment amount in the Eastern Hills Reservoir, we would have to, and as I say, academically, push back in other areas. And so one of the areas is the generic fund we have in future years for renewing water pipes.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. My question's about one project which stuck out to me, which is the Eastern Hills Reservoir. It's a local project to me, and I know there's been a lot of work done on it already over past years, and the cost increase there is quite significant, 40%. So I was just wondering what the explanation of that cost increase is. Is it materials gone up over time, or better planning, or quite what?
So there's two main reasons for that increase. The first one is that the budget figure that you've got in there is over 2 years old, and since then both Greater Wellington and Hutt City have provided consents in order for the work to occur, and so through that consenting process, Wellington Water is much more aware of the requirements that might need to be met. So there'll be some costs in relation to that. The second one is when this was being costed and planned over 2 years ago, there was some degree of efficiency in that there was another major reservoir that was going to be built at the same time in Porirua, and so both of these were going to be done as one package, but that now isn't happening. Porirua's one isn't going ahead.
Any other questions? No. Okay, so what we'll do now is just go to the recommendations. Sorry, yes, apologies, thank you. Just to get the order right. So we'll now move into the public excluded part of the meeting, just to consider the public excluded information. So I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against, no. Declare that carried.